This week's company is 3D Systems, and my one-sentence thesis is this. It's the elder statesman of additive manufacturing, trying to prove that being old doesn't mean being legacy by betting its future on printing things that absolutely cannot fail.
Mission critical is the word that keeps showing up. Hypersonic vehicle parts, dentures, hearing aids, parts for an F1 car. There's actually an analyst piece from simplywall.st in January asking whether the company is quietly recasting its entire investment story around mission-critical 3D printing for defense and medical. That's the question we're going to chew on.
And it's a company with a lot of texture. A 40-year history the company itself touts, a product line that runs from resin printers to triple laser metal machines, a class action lawsuit, a 19% revenue drop in one quarter, and then a rebound led by healthcare. All of that in the last 2 years.
Also, some genuine gaps. The public picture of who's actually steering this company is thinner than you'd expect for a NYSE-listed firm, and we're going to be honest about where our sourcing runs out.
So the origin, the products that explain the company, the leadership fog, the moat, the market bets, the rough patches, and what to watch. Let's do it. Normally this is my favorite segment, and I have to start with a confession. Our fact-checked brief is thin here. The company's own Our Story page claims a 40-year history of, quote, bridging the gap between inspiration and innovation. That's the sourced claim. That's basically it.
Which is worth pausing on. 40 years in this industry is genuinely ancient. Most of the companies we cover on this show didn't exist 15 years ago, but bridging inspiration and innovation tells you nothing about what the early technical bet was. And our packet doesn't have clean, independent sourcing on the founding details or the founder's role. One thing we can say with confidence, because it shows up in the moat material, the company's patent portfolio is concentrated in stereolithography. That's SLA, curing liquid resin layer by layer with light. The IP footprint tells you where the roots are, even when the origin story page doesn't.
And SLA is still all over the modern lineup. The brand new SLA 825 Dual, the Cadillac F1 deal, that's SLA technology. So whatever the precise founding date, the through line from the earliest days to right now is resin and light.
One caveat the fact checkers raised that I'll pass along, 40-year claims from companies this age can be rounded or can fold in predecessor entities. Without a precise founding year in our sources, treat it as directionally true rather than an anniversary you'd put on a cake.
Fair. The honest version of this segment is very old company. Stereolithography roots you can read directly out of its patent portfolio, and an early history we'd love a proper independent source for. If you're a listener with a good archive on this, our inbox is open. So let's do what the origin story can't and read the company through its products. I'll start with the one I think best explains modern 3D systems. Figure 4. There's a customer story on their own site, so company-controlled but detailed, about WS Audiology using Figure 4 to make hearing aid components in production-grade plastics, rigid and rubber-like materials.
Hearing aids matter as an example because they're the quiet proof case for additive generally. Every ear is different, volumes are high, and the part touches a human body, which means biocompatibility and regulatory scrutiny. If your resin platform survives that environment, you're not a prototyping company anymore. You're a manufacturing company. The other pillar is metal. The DMP Flex 350 Triple, that's their laser powder bed fusion machine with 3 lasers, which in practice means throughput, more of the build plate being worked at once. The press release says defense manufacturer Elmet Technologies adopted it to produce parts for hypersonic vehicles.
Hypersonics is about as far from a benchtop resin printer as you can get. What does a part like that demand, practically?
Refractory metals, extreme thermal loads, and a qualification burden that makes medical look relaxed. Every parameter locked, every build documented, powder traceability end to end. When a defense supplier picks your machine for that work, it's a statement about process repeatability, not just specs on a data sheet. Though we should note it's a press release, so it's the company's framing of the win.
Then the new stuff. Trade coverage reports they've launched the SLA 825 Dual and a fleet management software called additive. The launch is real. Our fact check calls it credible. But there's no independent review yet on whether they actually deliver the workflow improvements claimed. New products, no track record. That's not a knock, just where they are in their life cycle.
Additive is the one I'd watch, actually. Fleet management sounds boring until you've run a room with a dozen machines and no unified view of what's printing, what's down, and what's consuming resin. Software like that is how hardware companies try to become sticky.
Dental deserves its own beat. NextDent is their dental materials brand, and the new thing is the NextDent jetted denture solution. Business Wire confirms it was announced with a summer 2026 European launch target. So as we record, it's on the doorstep, not in dental labs at scale.
Announced with regulatory clearance behind it, which we'll get into, but yes, its commercial impact is still entirely in front of it. Don't confuse a certification press release with market traction.
And the fun one? Trade coverage from May says the Cadillac Formula One team selected 3D Systems SLA technology for the 2026 season. Wind tunnel models, presumably fast turnaround aero parts. F1 has always been an SLA showcase.
It's a great logo. Whether it moves revenue is a different question. F1 deals are usually more marketing than money. Now, the framing our brief flags as dubious is the one-stop shop positioning. Prototyping, tooling, end-use production, all under one roof. That's the company's self-assessment, and there's no independent benchmarking behind it. My practical skepticism, a broad portfolio is only a one-stop shop if the pieces actually integrate. Resin, metal powder bed, dental, jetting, and fleet software are very different animals. Is it a platform or a collection of technologies that share a logo? Our sources don't settle that, and I want to see the workflow before I believe the brochure.
The generous read is that the breadth itself is the story. Very few companies can credibly show up in a hearing aid factory, a hypersonics program, and a dental lab in the same year. Whether that breadth is a strength or a focus problem is kind of the question of the whole episode. Which brings us to leadership. And here I have to be blunt. This is the weakest sourced part of our brief, and we're going to say so rather than paper over it. What we know, 3D Systems trades on the NYSE under DDD. And per a simplywall.st piece from January, it has significant institutional ownership.
We also know from PR Newswire and Bloomberg Law reporting that a shareholder class action filed in 2025 names certain officers for allegedly misleading investors about demand. The excerpts we have don't name the individuals, so we won't guess.
And in July 2026, this month, the company completed an upsized public offering per a White & Case note. Upsized means demand let them sell more shares than initially planned, so investors showed up. But an offering also means the company wanted cash.
Both readings are legitimate. Upsizing signals appetite. Needing to raise at all after a stretch of declining revenue can signal that the balance sheet needed help, and existing shareholders get diluted either way. Without an executive on record explaining the use of proceeds in our sourcing, we can't tell you which story is true.
What strikes me is how strategy-shaped the company's recent moves are. Even though we can't see the strategists, somebody decided to lean into defense facilities, chase EU medical device certification, and stand up a Saudi joint venture. Those are deliberate, expensive, multi-year choices.
You can infer a strategy from the fingerprints. What you can infer is the culture, the succession picture, or how the litigation is landing internally. Anyone who tells you those things without sources is writing fiction. One more inference I'll allow myself. High institutional ownership plus an active class action means this management team operates under real scrutiny. Public market discipline cuts both ways. It forces accountability, and it can also force short-term thinking exactly when a turnaround needs patience.
So file leadership under visible outputs, invisible people for this episode. On to what the company is actually good at.
My take on the moat. It's less about any single machine and more about three layered things: materials, breadth, regulatory clearances, and IP. Machines get copied. Those three are slower to replicate.
Start with materials. There's a company press release from 2020 announcing a major expansion of the plastics portfolio. And the broader claim in our brief, that the portfolio spans plastics, metals, and biocompatible options, is rated plausible and consistent with what they sell, though not every leg of it is independently evidenced in our packet.
Materials are where the recurring revenue lives and where the switching costs live. If you've qualified a specific resin for a hearing aid shell or a denture base, need nuns, meaning you've run the testing, filed the paperwork, locked the process, you do not casually swap to a cheaper third-party material. requalification costs more than the material ever will, which is why the EU MDR certification matters more than it sounds. Business Wire confirms 3D Systems achieved full scope certification under the EU's medical device regulation, clearing the path for next dentures in Europe. MDR is a notoriously heavy regime. Companies have exited the European market rather than comply with it.
Our brief flags the high barrier to entry, framing as an interpretation rather than a quantified fact, though. The certification is real. How much protection it buys is the softer claim.
A fair flag, and here's my honest read as someone who's watched qualification eat shop floor budgets. The barrier is real, but it's a moat around the market, not around 3D Systems specifically. Competitors can climb the same wall. It buys a head start measured in years, not permanence.
Then the patents. The stereolithography portfolio is presented as a competitive advantage, company narrative per our brief, but it's also drawn fire. Trade coverage at 3D printing industry from early 2025 details a patent lawsuit accusing 3D Systems of a, quote, brazen anti-competitive scheme.
That cuts in an interesting direction. Aggressive enforcement tells you the company believes its patents have teeth, but litigation is also how patents get tested, and the fact checkers note the risk. Plainly, an adverse ruling could weaken exactly the IP the moat rests on. A moat you have to defend in court is a moat with a question mark on it.
And the newest layer is software. AddiTrack, confirmed by their own product page, extends the ecosystem into fleet and workflow management. The open question from our brief is differentiation. How it stacks up against third-party fleet software is unknown.
There's also a Voxel Matters comparative piece from May that includes 3D Systems in a discussion of where stereolithography innovation is headed. So independent observers still count them as relevant in their core technology, not dominant, not dismissed, relevant. That's a fair one-word summary of the moat, honestly.
Now the map. Where does this company actually sit? Reading our brief, 3 anchors jump out. Defense, healthcare, and dental, and a genuinely unusual international bet in Saudi Arabia.
Defense first. The Elmet Hypersonics partnership we covered, and separately, TCT Magazine reported in January that 3D Systems is expanding its Littleton, Colorado facility specifically for defense programs. That's independent trade coverage, and facilities are a costly signal. You don't pour concrete for a market you're dabbling in.
Healthcare is the one carrying the financials right now. A Quiver quantitative summary of Q1 2026 earnings says revenue growth was led by healthcare. Add the MDR certification, the WS audiology story, and a Voxel Matters piece from last November about a dental lab having production times on partial dentures using their technology.
That dental lab example is the kind of evidence I actually trust, by the way. A named lab, a specific outcome, half the production time, reported by a trade outlet rather than the company. That's a customer noticing something real on the floor. The caveat our brief raises on healthcare, we don't have a segment level revenue breakdown, so key growth driver is directional. And there's a fair question about whether growth is sustainable demand or a bump from regulatory clearances landing all at once.
Then the wild card, NAMI, the joint venture in Saudi Arabia. Metal Additive Manufacturing Magazine and Voxel Matters both report on it, including the Saudi electricity company acquiring a 30% stake. That's a state-linked utility buying into a 3D Systems joint venture.
It's a distinctive move. Most Western additive manufacturing companies sell into the Gulf. Embedding via a joint venture with strategic local investors is a deeper commitment. The upside is a position in a market that's spending heavily on industrial localization. The risk, which the fact checkers flag, is that its early stage returns are unproven, and the whole thing rides on Saudi Vision 2030 execution and geopolitics, things entirely outside the company's control.
Zoom out and the pattern is clear: regulated, qualified, high-stakes verticals, defense, medical, dental, motorsport. Almost nothing in this brief is about the prototyping and hobbyist end of the market.
Which makes sense as a survival strategy. The low end of additive has been commoditized brutally. Regulated verticals are where qualification and materials clearances protect margins. It's a similar production pivot to the one we watched the other legacy giant attempt a few episodes back, and we two old incumbents converging on the same answer, which tells you something about where the defensible ground in this industry actually is.
And the analyst framing supports it. That simply wall.nist piece explicitly asks whether 3D Systems is recasting its investment story around mission-critical printing. Though note, that's an analyst posing a question, not the company announcing a strategy. The market hasn't fully bought the story yet, or the analyst wouldn't be asking.
One concentration worry before we move on. The defense narrative leans heavily on Elmet in our sourcing. One marquee customer is a proof point. It's not yet a customer base.
Time for the hard parts, and there are real ones. The last 2 years for 3D Systems read like a stress test. Let's take it in order. The legal front, the financial front, and the response.
Legal first, two separate fights. The shareholder class action, PR Newswire, and Bloomberg Law both reported the 2025 filing alleges the company misled investors about demand. And the patent suit we mentioned, where 3D Systems is the one accused of anti-competitive behavior, different courts, different stakes, both live.
The demand allegation is the one that connects to the numbers because the numbers were genuinely rough. 3D printing industry reported Q3 2025 revenue dropped 19%. Voxel Matters reported Q2 2025 revenue declining 2%, though with improved profitability. So they were cutting their way to better margins on a shrinking top line.
And 3dprint.com covered the cost-cutting measures directly back in May of 2025. Improving profitability while revenue falls is real work, and I don't want to be glib about it, but it has a ceiling. You cannot cut your way to growth, and everyone on a shop floor knows what sustained cost-cutting feels like from the inside.
A transparency note here. Our research packet mentions a few other turnaround claims. A software divestiture, a Q4 return to growth, that our fact checkers couldn't verify from the captured sources. So we're leaving those out rather than repeating them.
What we can stand behind for the recovery, that quiver quantitative summary of Q1 2026 showing revenue growth led by healthcare, and the White and Case note confirming the upsized public offering completed this July. Decline cuts, healthcare-led growth, fresh capital. That arc is sourced.
How do you read the arc overall? Because I can squint and see either a turnaround or a company treading water.
I read it as fragile but real. The healthcare growth is verified, and it aligns with where they've invested, which is what a genuine turnaround looks like early on. But 1 quarter is 1 quarter. The class action is unresolved, and a company that just raised equity is a company that needed runway. I'd call it a patient in recovery, not a patient discharged.
The fairest framing might be that the turbulence explains the strategy. A 19% revenue drop is exactly the kind of event that pushes a company out of cyclical prototyping demand and toward regulated verticals with stickier customers. The pain and the pivot are the same story.
And to be fair to them on the litigation, allegations are allegations. The class action hasn't produced findings in our sourcing, and companies get sued in bad years almost reflexively. It's a risk to track, not a verdict to assume.
Future watch. Let's be disciplined about confirmed versus speculative because this company's next chapter has both. Jordan, give me the confirmed pile first.
Confirmed. The next jetted denture launch is targeted for this summer in Europe, MDR certification in hand, per Business Wire and 3D printing industry. Confirmed. The NAMI joint venture exists with Saudi Electricity's 30% stake. Confirmed. Cadillac F1 selected their SLA for 2026, and confirmed as an expectation. Stock Titan quotes Elmet expecting its C103 system to qualify for hypersonic production. Note the phrasing, expecting to qualify.
C103 being a niobium alloy for extreme heat, and qualification in defense is the whole ballgame, right? An expectation is not a program of record.
Qualification means proving with mountains of test data that your printed parts perform identically every time under the actual mission environment. Programs slip, parts fail coupons, requirements change. If Elmet gets there, it validates the DMP platform for some of the most demanding parts on Earth. If it stalls, the hypersonic story stays a press release. That's the single sharpest binary to watch.
On dentures, my watch item is commercial, not regulatory. The European market has entrenched workflows and competitors. Clearance opens the door, it doesn't fill the order book. 12 months from now, I want to see named labs and unit volumes like that partial denture story, not just launch coverage.
Also watch what they say about the offering proceeds. The raise is confirmed, how it's deployed is not, at least in our sourcing. If that capital shows up as denture manufacturing capacity, defense facility build-out, or NAMI investment, the mission-critical story gets more believable. If it quietly covers operations, less so.
And the F1 Halo, fun to watch. Plausible brand lift per our brief, but explicitly speculative. I'd treat any F1 proven marketing next year as exactly that, marketing.
The overarching risk stays the one the analysts flagged. Can they sustain revenue growth while carrying 2 lawsuits? Every growth vector we just listed is real, and every one of them pays off on a multi-year timeline. Public markets are not famous for multi-year patience.
Landing it. Why 3D Systems matters. It's one of the oldest names in this industry, running one of the clearest live experiments. Can a legacy additive company reinvent itself around regulated mission-critical production and make the economics work? The pieces are genuinely there. Verified defense wins, verified healthcare growth, hard-won regulatory clearances, an unusual golf bet,
and genuine fragility alongside them, a recovery that's one good quarter old, litigation on 2 fronts, a fresh capital raise, and a leadership picture we couldn't properly see from public sources. Both things are true at once, and pretending otherwise in either direction would be doing listeners a disservice.
Who should pay attention? Anyone in dental or medical manufacturing, because the next Dent European launch this summer is a near-term event with real workflow implications. And anyone tracking defense additive, because the Elmet qualification effort is a live test case for the whole hypersonics and printing thesis.
My one question to track, does the C103 hypersonic qualification actually land? Like, it's the cleanest binary signal of whether mission critical is this company's future or its marketing.
Mine's simpler. A year from now, is healthcare still leading revenue growth, or was Q1 the high watermark? Watch those 2 lines, and you'll know which version of 3D Systems showed up. That's the episode. Thanks for listening to Layer Lines Weekly, and we'll see you next week.